Now, allow me to respectfully invite His Excellency Philip Calvert, Ambassador of Canada to the Kingdom of Thailand, the Kingdom of Cambodia, and the Lao People Democratic Republic to deliver his keynote address.
Professor Goh Peng, President of Panay National University of Cambodia, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a great honor to be here today to speak at this Keeping the Faith conference. So I'd like to thank PUC and the Human Rights Resource Center for offering me this opportunity to speak, and to commend them both on their hard work in successfully organizing this very important event. I'd also like to acknowledge today the presence here of Francis Huat, Canada's Chargé d'Affaires in Cambodia, here in Phnom Penh. I am ambassador to Cambodia but resident in Bangkok, but we are now proud to have our renewed diplomatic presence here in Cambodia. It's a reflection of Canada's commitment to bilateral relations, to Southeast Asia, and to ASEAN. Let me start off by saying how very significant it is that you are all gathered here today to discuss some fundamental freedoms in ASEAN. The issue of freedom of religion, thought, and conscience is an extremely important one here in Cambodia, across the ASEAN region, and all around the world. And the Keeping the Faith report is itself an important, detailed work of great value. And we are happy as Canada to be able to contribute to its translation as well as to this conference. This conference today is also another example of our cooperation with the HRRC. We have been pleased to previously work closely with them through our embassy in Jakarta on issues of human rights and religious freedom. So today's conference will provide another valuable opportunity for those gathered here to discuss these issues in the region. As Canada's ambassador to Cambodia, Thailand, and the Lao PDR, I often get involved in discussions of human rights, of freedom of conscience, of religious freedoms. And I recognize that these are sensitive issues, and these are challenging issues in the region. I'm also always conscious of the fact that I'm a Westerner, that I'm an outsider, and that I approach them, when I discuss these issues, I approach them as someone coming from outside. So to me, it's important that we as Canada, and I as our ambassador, be able to convey our views, express our concerns constructively, to discuss these issues without being vulnerable to the accusation of imposing values from outside, or being called a cultural imperialist or something like that. As this report, Keeping Our Faith, so clearly sets out, and as we all know, freedom of thought, conscience, and religion are values that are stated in the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. Freedom of religion is also guaranteed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and by Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which also guarantees freedom of expression and freedom of assembly, freedom of association. The covenant, many but not all of ASEAN members have ratified, and Cambodia has ratified this. Cambodia has these obligations. So these are values and commitments freely agreed upon by ASEAN member states. The challenge, of course, as we all know, is in the implementation of these commitments and the support for protection of these rights, the support for freedom of religion, the support of people's capacity and faith and ability to express their own faith, to practice their own faith without interference. It is an unfortunate fact of the 21st century, as Professor Goh Peng mentioned, that in this era of astounding technological advances, instant communications, in which our optimism, and in which we thought in our optimism would foster increased tolerance and awareness, we thought greater communication would bring greater awareness, greater tolerance. But we also see daily evidence of the continued strength and even growth of religious intolerance and discrimination around the world. According to one recent study, 77% of the world's population lives in countries with high or very high government restrictions on religion and or social hostilities involving religion. This figure is up from 68% in 2007. And we see around the world burgeoning religious extremism, violence, all based on intolerance. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I spoke at a conference on religious freedom in South Asia. It was supposed to have been held in Pakistan, but this was considered too sensitive and perhaps too dangerous to do, so it was moved to Bangkok. Clearly, this issue of religious freedoms is not an issue for the faint-hearted, yet it's very important. So there was still a lot of work for all of us to do, including ASEAN. And Canada is willing to find more and other constructive ways to work with ASEAN member states, to work with ASEAN as an institution, to promote human rights and religious freedoms. We do this because Canada believes that religious freedom is a fundamental human right, confirmed and supported by those agreements, those international covenants I've mentioned, and many more. But the question is, how do we protect these freedoms? How do we protect this concept? How do we promote this concept in a world in which such freedoms seem to be under attack? To me, promoting tolerance, human rights, and diversity is more than about promoting abstract beliefs and principles, although they're very important, and it's important that you have these principles and have these beliefs. But I also believe that there's a business case for such freedoms, if you will call it that, a business case for tolerance and respect for diversity and pluralism. Discrimination against religious and ethnic minorities, as with all forms of discrimination, is not only a morally wrong way to behave, it's ultimately destabilizing to society, however much such discrimination be enforced on the excuse or basis of promoting stability. Such discrimination spreads divisions, contributes to a climate of fear, intolerance, and stigmatization, and in marginalizing one element of society, it weakens the entire fabric of a country. In extreme cases, we have seen countries torn apart by these destructive tendencies. And in contrast, countries tend to end up as being more peaceful, secure, and stable when these practices are eliminated, when these discriminations are stopped, when religious freedoms are allowed. I come from Canada. We're a country of immigrants. With the exception of our Indigenous peoples, our First Nations peoples, we all came from somewhere else, either recently, last week, last month, or centuries back. We believe that the strength and stability of our country springs from our diversity, and we continue to champion tolerance, pluralism, and diversity in all spheres of society. Of course, we're not perfect by any means. We have our own history and a dark history of intolerance. We have our own history of discrimination, and we continue to struggle with issues of discrimination in contemporary Canadian society. But we also work hard to find that balance between religious freedoms and other principles fundamental to our society. And this is always a challenge, balancing religious freedoms with fundamental principles like gender equality, like our commitment to freedom of sexual orientation, and many other principles that we have. So it's a complex issue to follow, and it's an evolving story. ASEAN as has been mentioned, ASEAN has made progress in human rights, but finding the balance is also a challenge for ASEAN as an institution. The balance between promoting respect for human rights, promoting respect for religious freedoms, and the principle of non-interference, which is a fundamental principle of ASEAN. It's also an evolving story, and I'm not convinced that the right balance has been achieved, but I think ASEAN is working on this in these challenging circumstances. For our part, Canada has welcomed new arrivals of differing faiths, and some with no professed faith at all, because of course freedom of religion includes the freedom to practice no religion. We welcome them from every corner of the globe. They become an important part of our fabric. We are now welcoming refugees, predominantly Muslim, from Syria. This will have an impact on our communities, notably the smaller ones, but these communities are welcoming these people with open arms. And in doing so, we are again reaffirming the value and dignity of its citizens irrespective of their racial or ethnic origins, their language, or their religious faith. We honor this diversity. We value it as an essential building block of our society. So this has been incorporated into our foreign policy. We have an Office of Religious Freedom, and Canada, through this office, Canada actively advocates on behalf of religious minorities under threat and continues to champion the cause of universal human rights around the globe. We work with a wide variety of partners in government, civil society, the media, and elsewhere to promote and strengthen these fundamental rights. The Canada Fund for Local Initiatives, which has contributed to this conference and to the translation of this report into Khmer, has provided another important tool that we use to advance this cause. With that, let me conclude by wishing you a very productive and informative discussion today. I'm honored to be here. Thanks again to the Human Rights Resource Center and to our Cambodian host, the PUC, for their concerted efforts in organizing this event. We are proud to be working with you on this project, and we're proud to be involved in this important discussion on religious freedoms. Thank you very much.
Much appreciated for your valuable remarks. His Excellency Ambassador, please stay on the stage. I would like to invite Dr. Ko Peng to serve the token of appreciation.